I didn't expect her to stand. She had been in that chair since she was 3 years old. Or at least that's what they said, that she couldn't move, couldn't speak, that her name was Sophie Whitmore and she was, as they put it, special from birth. But 10 minutes after they left, after the front door of the Whitmore mansion shut behind them, after the echoes of their designer luggage wheels faded across the marble, I heard the softest sound behind me in the kitchen. I thought it might be the wind, a creak, something meaningless. But when I turned around, Sophie was standing in the doorway, barefoot, slightly swaying. One hand braced on the frame, her legs trembling just enough to show she hadn't done this in a long time, but she was up, standing, watching me. Her brown hair hung in quiet strands around her cheeks. Her eyes, deep, alert, intelligent, met mine for the very first time, not as a patient, but as a person. And then she said it. 7 words, not whispered, not forced, just said. They want my $4 million. Please help. I dropped the wooden spoon in my hand. It clattered against the stovetop, rattling louder than it should have. The air shifted. I remember thinking, that can't be her voice. She's never spoken. She doesn't speak. She's not supposed to speak. But she stood there, this 8-year-old girl they'd told me was neurologically impaired, mute, and bedridden. And she looked at me, not with fear, but with the kind of pleading that knows exactly what's at stake. In that moment, I forgot the pasta boiling on the stove. I forgot the sterile binder filled with hourly care routines. I forgot the Whitmore's crisp instructions delivered with perfect smiles and colder eyes. All I saw was a child who had been told to stay quiet, and all I heard were those 7 words echoing louder than anything else that had ever been said in that house. 3 days earlier, I had been at home folding laundry, listening to the low hum of the dryer and the ticking clock over the sink when my phone rang. It was Vivian Whitmore, my mother-in-law. Vivian never called to chat. Her voice, as always, was measured and pleasant, the kind of politeness that made you feel like you were being handled, not spoken to. She said they were heading to Hawaii, a family vacation, 2 weeks. All of them, her husband Charles, their daughter Brooke, their son Andrew, and even my husband Daniel. And they needed someone to stay with Sophie. Not asked. Informed. Rachel, dear, we've let go of Sophie's regular nurses. They've been so unreliable. And it's just not fair to expect Brooke to stay behind. You're the perfect choice. Daniel agrees. I stood there in my kitchen holding a dish towel in one hand, trying to process what she had just said. Sophie was Brooke's daughter, not mine. I had no training in special needs care. I was a school teacher, not a nurse, but that didn't seem to matter. I remember asking quietly, "What about my job?" Vivian's tone brightened as if I'd asked about the weather. "Darling, it's spring break next week, isn't it? And Charles has already spoken to the superintendent. He'll cover the second week as a personal favor. You won't lose a single day's pay. It's all arranged, like I was a chess piece." That night, I confronted Daniel. He stood in the hallway, suitcase half-packed, looking sheepish. He was always kind, always loving. But when it came to his family, he folded like tissue paper in the rain. "Babe, I know it's sudden, but they really need us. You'll be in the guest suite. It's practically a mini apartment. I'll be back before you know it." I asked if he thought it was fair. He looked at me with that half-smile, the one that tried to calm without fixing. "It's just 2 weeks." And that's how I found myself in the Whitmore mansion, a grand and echoing estate built on old money and older secrets, standing in a room that smelled like disinfectant and lemon oil, being handed a binder by Brooke, the girl's own mother, who barely looked at her child as she zipped up a designer suitcase. "Just follow the routine. Meds 3 times a day, blended shakes, no missed doses," she said, flicking her long manicured nails over the printed schedule. "If you skip one, she gets difficult." Difficult how I asked. Brooke shrugged. "She just does." The last thing she said before leaving stuck in my mind for days after. "It's mostly for show anyway." Then came Charles, stern, silver-haired, and still radiating the kind of power that made people lean back without knowing why. "We're trusting you with our granddaughter Rachel. Don't disappoint us." And just like that, they were gone. Luggage wheeled out, cars pulling away. No goodbye for Sophie. No wave. Not even eye contact. Just me alone in their cold, sprawling house, and a little girl in a wheelchair who stared out the window like she already knew everything I didn't. After they left, I wheeled Sophie into the living room like the binder suggested. Her chair was high-end medical grade with custom padding and straps that hadn't been buckled. She didn't move or speak. She didn't look at the television I turned on. She just stared forward, blank her face, unreadable. Still, I spoke to her. Maybe it was habit, my teacher instincts, or just loneliness. I told her I'd be in the kitchen making dinner, that I'd be close by, that I'd made pasta. It felt silly at first, like I was narrating to the walls, but not speaking to her felt worse, like I was becoming part of the silence everyone else had built around her. The kitchen was bright, polished to the point of sterility, stainless steel, stone counters, nothing personal, nothing warm. I set the pasta to boil, then opened the fridge to get Sophie's nutrition shake. The containers were lined up labeled by day and time, along with the tiny bottles of crushed medication that Brooke had emphasized. I hesitated, not out of suspicion yet, but because I was overwhelmed. It felt wrong to be caring for a child I barely knew in a house that didn't feel real. Still, I followed the instructions, prepping her shake measuring pills, reminding myself this wasn't about trust, it was about routine. Then I felt it. That sensation, faint, instinctive, like someone was watching me. I turned, and that's when I saw her. Standing, no chair, no straps, no blank stare. Sophie. Her knees were slightly bent. One arm touched the doorframe, steadying her. She looked unsure, but not incapable. Her chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths. And her eyes. God, those eyes met mine and didn't look away. I froze. "Sophie," I whispered, and then she spoke. Her voice was soft, a little raspy, but unmistakably clear. "They want my $4 million. Please help." The room fell silent. Even the water on the stove seemed to stop bubbling. I stared at her. Her lips had moved. Her words made sense. She wasn't hallucinating. I wasn't hallucinating. "Sophie, you can talk," I said, barely louder than a breath. She nodded. Then she looked over her shoulder as if afraid someone else might be listening and added, "But you can't tell them. If they know I told you, they'll hurt me again." I eased toward her slowly, not wanting to scare her, not sure what I was even seeing. My mind was racing, half of it insisting I call 911, the other half whispering that I already knew this wasn't a delusion. Sophie took one shaky step forward, then another. Her legs weren't strong, but they worked. Her fingers clutched the trim along the wall as she guided herself toward the nearest chair. I pulled it out gently, letting her sit down without saying anything more. She looked small in the oversized kitchen chair, feet dangling, hands folded in her lap. Still silent now. Watching me. "Can you tell me what's going on?" I asked softly. She hesitated, then nodded. "When my other grandma and grandpa died, they left me money. $4 million. Mommy didn't like that. She started giving me medicine, made me sleepy, weak." Her voice wavered, but her eyes stayed clear. She wasn't reciting something, she was remembering it. When I didn't take it, she pinched me, locked me in the closet. They all told me to pretend, that if I talked or moved when people were around, I'd be taken away forever, that no one would believe me anyway. I couldn't speak. "I tried to tell a nurse once," she continued. "She left after that. They said she moved away, but I think she saw something." She pulled something from beneath her shirt, a small spiral notebook, its cover soft from wear. She opened it on the table between us. Inside were pages of neatly printed entries, short sentences, dates, names, fragments of overheard conversations. I skimmed an entry. Mommy said she'll be declared incompetent. That way, I keep the trust. Another grandpa told Mommy Judge Wilson owes me. We'll fix the papers. I felt cold all over. "How did you learn to write like this?" I asked. I taught myself. They didn't think I was learning, but I listened. I looked at papers in Mommy's office when she wasn't home. I copied the words. I had time. I looked at this child, this little girl who had been presumed unreachable, and saw someone who had been awake the whole time, watching, surviving. I picked up one of the pill bottles on the counter and read the label. The dosage was too high for an 8-year-old unless under extreme conditions. And yet no one had ever questioned it. No school records, no independent doctors, no second opinions. Just the word of a wealthy family. My stomach turned. Sophie looked up. I waited until now because they never leave me with just one person. Always nurses. But you talked to me like I was real. Her voice cracked at the end. In that moment, I saw the weight she'd carried, not just the drugs or the silence, but the sheer effort of pretending to be invisible. And now she had chosen to speak. To me. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake in the guest suite, listening to the soft, measured breaths of Sophie in the next room. She was safe for now. She had eaten dinner without the medication. She'd smiled faintly while I showed her how to shuffle a deck of cards. She had even asked quietly if she could help set the table. But my mind wouldn't rest. I kept thinking about that notebook, the entries, the way her small hands had turned each page as if she'd been waiting years for someone to see it. The next morning, I stood in front of the kitchen sink holding her morning medication bottle. I opened it. The pills clicked against the glass rim. I stood there for a full minute, maybe more. If I gave them to her, I'd be playing my part in what she claimed was abuse. But what if she needed them? What if this sudden clarity was the break? What if I was wrong? And then I remembered what she said the night before. Not the words, but the way she looked at me when she said them. I emptied the pills into the sink and turned on the disposal. When Sophie came down, walking slow but steady, I handed her the nutrition shake without the crushed sedatives. She drank it, then looked at me carefully. "No medicine today?" I shook my head. "Not unless you need it." She didn't say anything, but the relief in her shoulders said enough. By midday, she was sharper, more focused, her hands steadier. Her speech, once slightly slurred, was clearer. She told me jokes, quiet little ones she'd made up in her head. She beat me at Go Fish. In the afternoon, she took my hand and led me down the hallway. "Mommy keeps important papers in her office," she said. The office was all designer furniture and shallow shelves staged for show not function. But behind a potted orchid, just as Sophie had told me, was a tiny brass key. The filing cabinet opened on the second try. Inside, trust documents, bank records, appointment letters, prescriptions. I sat on the floor and began pulling file after file. Sophie sat beside me, cross-legged, notebook in hand. She pointed to names phrases. Some matched her journal entries. Some were new. One envelope was marked, "Private, do not copy." Inside were early pediatric reports records from before the age of 3. They showed a healthy child, walking, talking, developing normally. Then came a sharp drop notes citing sudden regression neurological concerns, sedation necessary for safety, all dated within months of the Blackwell's fatal car accident. "That's when Mommy got the money," Sophie said. I looked at her, unsure how she even understood any of this. I don't know everything she added, but I remember. I remember being able to talk. I remember running in the backyard. She paused. And I remember when it all stopped. There was still one piece missing, one more file I hadn't yet found. A confirmation of what they were trying to do next. But even without it, the pattern was forming. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a system, a carefully built illusion. And the house, the pristine, perfect Whitmore mansion, wasn't hiding dust in its corners. It was hiding a crime. It was just past 3 in the morning when I woke to the sound of the front door. Not a knock. Not the chime of the bell, just the heavy click of the lock and the soft groan of wood against the marble floor. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then I heard voices muffled but familiar. Vivian's sharp cadence, Brooke's impatient huff, the slow, steady baritone that could only be Charles. They were home. They weren't supposed to be home for another 12 hours. I sat up, heart pounding. My eyes scanned the dark room for my phone, for my shoes, for some idea of what to do next. Then I thought of Sophie. I rushed down the hallway, bare feet against polished tile, and pushed open her bedroom door. She was already awake, sitting up, the covers pulled to her chest. "They're back," she whispered. "I know." Sometimes they come early," she added, her voice trembling. "To check, to make sure I've been good." The fear in her voice was different now, not the general fear of a child caught in something too big. This was the fear of someone who knew what happened when you didn't perform the part they'd written for you. "We go back to the plan," I told her. "One night. Just one more night." We moved quickly. Sophie returned to her medical bed. I helped her arrange the blankets, loosened her limbs to appear limp, and handed her the stuffed rabbit she hadn't touched in days. She lay back motionless. I stood just in time to hear Brooke's footsteps coming down the hall. She appeared in the doorway, still in travel clothes, her hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, eyes already scanning the room. "What are you doing in here?" she asked. I heard noise. "I came to check on her," I replied calmly. "You're back early." Brooke didn't smile. Daddy's meetings ended ahead of schedule. She stepped past me and leaned over Sophie's bed. "Medication?" she asked, without turning around. "As prescribed. Log is in the kitchen." Brooke stared at Sophie, searching for signs, any crack in the act. But Sophie didn't blink, didn't shift. When Brooke finally left the room, I placed a hand on Sophie's arm and gave it a gentle squeeze. "You did perfect." But in my chest, my breath was tight. Because the one thing I hadn't planned for was all of them returning together. The entire Whitmore family had gathered downstairs like it was a board meeting. Charles sat upright in his favorite chair, a bourbon already in hand. Vivian was poised beside him, legs crossed, fingers perfectly still. Andrew stood by the fireplace, arms folded, jaw tight. And Daniel, my husband, stood near the back, unsure whether to move closer or farther away. I entered last. "I trust everything was satisfactory in our absence," Charles said, his voice like a courtroom verdict. "Yes," I replied. "Satisfactory?" Vivian narrowed her eyes, her tone syrup-sweet. "Curious." Before we left, Brooke counted Sophie's medications. Yet now, several doses are missing. I didn't flinch. "I followed your instructions." Perhaps there was a miscount. Silence. Then footsteps on the stairs. Every head turned. And there she was. Sophie. Standing. Dressed in her soft cotton pajamas, arms relaxed at her sides, her chin lifted just enough to show she wasn't afraid. Vivian gasped. Brooke froze. Andrew cursed under his breath. Charles's glass halted mid-air. "Hello, Mommy," Sophie said calmly. "Hello, Grandma." "Hello, Grandpa. I'm feeling much better now." The room cracked like ice beneath weight. Brooke lunged first. "She needs her medication. She's having some kind of episode." "No," Sophie said, stepping back. "I'm not taking it anymore. I know what you're doing. I know about my money." Everyone went still. Brooke looked to Charles, searching for instruction. Vivian's hand hovered over her pearls. I stepped in front of Sophie, steady but firm. "She's not sick. She's never been sick. You've been drugging her to control her. And now she's done pretending." Charles rose slowly, his presence filling the room. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he said, voice low. "This is a family matter, and you've grossly misinterpreted it. I've seen the documents, the trust fund, the falsified reports, the birth records, the surveillance. And Sophie, she remembers everything." Brooke's composure snapped. She grabbed her purse, pulled out a pill bottle, and shoved toward us. "Take it," she barked. "Take it now, or you'll regret it," Sophie cried out as Brooke caught her wrist. Without thinking, I stepped between them, pushing Brooke back hard enough that she stumbled into the coffee table. "Don't touch her." Charles moved toward me like a storm cloud. "That's assault." "Then call the police," I said. "Please do." I held up my phone. "In fact, you'll want to answer the door." It rang then, like fate waiting on the porch. Everyone looked toward the hallway. Then the door opened, and standing there was Kelly Bishop, my closest friend, and a family attorney. Beside her were 2 uniformed officers and a woman holding a clipboard from Child Protective Services. Mr. Whitmore Kelly said with quiet authority, "We need to speak with your granddaughter." No one moved, because in that moment they all knew the house wasn't theirs anymore, and the truth had come to stay. For a moment, no one said anything. The silence after Kelly Bishop's voice was louder than any shouting match, the kind of silence that makes walls lean in. We received credible evidence of long-term medical neglect and financial abuse, the CPS officer said firmly. We're here to interview Sophie privately. Charles stepped forward, still holding his bourbon like it was a shield. You don't understand, this girl has severe impairments. She hallucinates. She fabricates. Vivian added quickly, her voice trembling for the first time. Jessica has always had emotional issues. She's under stress. Kelly opened her folder and placed copies of documents on the coffee table one by one. Medical records from before Sophie's 3rd birthday, handwritten logs, videos, surveillance footage, bank statements, emails, and testimony, your own daughter's if necessary. Brooke's voice cracked as she clung to denial like a child clutching a doll. No. Daddy said it was just for a little while. We were just trying to protect her. Charles didn't look at her. He looked at Kelly. Name your price. Everyone has one. One of the officers stepped forward. Mr. Whitmore, I suggest you stop speaking. I moved closer to Sophie, who had stayed quiet the whole time. Her hands were shaking, but her feet stayed planted. Daniel stood to the side, pale eyes darting between his family and the woman he married. Sophie, the CPS worker, said softly, Can we talk for a moment? Sophie looked up at me. I nodded. It's okay. You don't have to be afraid anymore. She followed the woman into the sitting room. As the door closed behind them, Vivian turned to Daniel, almost pleading. Tell them, Danny, she's lying. You know she's lying. He stared at her. And then, I don't know anything anymore. He said, his voice low. Maybe I never did. Charles took one step toward him,